Mayella and I are pleased to be here today to provide you with an overview of the strategic framework that we've developed to support households to manage their energy bills. Just to give you an overview of our presentation today, I'll first talk about the objective for this report and provide an overview of the strategic framework. I will then hand over to Mayella to talk about the tools and services to support households to manage their energy bills. And then I'll wrap up by discussing how the strategic framework can be used by policymakers and the suggested areas for further research. And as Kerry indicated, we will finish by responding to any questions you may have. As set out on this slide, the objective of this project was to develop a strategic framework to support policymakers to consider the range of tools and services needed by Australian households to effectively manage their energy bills. Okay, we developed the strategic framework through a 5-step methodology. The key elements of this were, first of all, to develop a set of design criteria to guide the development of the strategic framework, a literature review, a stock take of tools and services available to support Australian households. And just to note that that stock take was done in May 2018, so it's now just a little out of date, and consultation with a range of stakeholders, including policymakers, industry, consumer representatives, and academics. And that consultation occurred at several points along that process. So early in the process, we developed a set of design criteria. The design criteria were developed in consultation with stakeholders to guide the selection or filtering of plausible segmentation models that we identified through the literature review and the development of the segmentation framework itself. The design criteria comprise 3 high-level principles: necessary conditions, strategic fit, and feasibility. The first level of assessment involved defining the necessary conditions that the framework needed to meet. The necessary conditions were that the framework covers all residential energy consumers. And given the earlier work under Power Shift, it was important to note that it was not limited to vulnerable or low-income consumers. It needed to align with current and future requirements. So not only did the framework need to meet stakeholders' current requirements, it needed to be enduring and flexible enough to be refined in the future and adaptable to accommodate consumers' changing circumstances. And it's important to note that as we move forward, because in some cases we haven't been too specific, which would have meant that it wasn't future-proofed. And also it needs to be readily applicable. The framework needed to be relevant, pragmatic, describe segments based on readily identifiable characteristics, and provide insights that can be used by policymakers and others. The second level of assessment involves strategic fit, and that included consideration of the level of support for the framework by those that are most likely to use it. And we did, the framework did evolve through that stakeholder consultation to meet that particular requirement. The extent to which it accounts for any synergies with existing segmentation models, and the ability to identify a manageable number of segments that are sufficiently different, and each of those segments contains consumers that are sufficiently similar. And the third level of assessment involved feasibility, which included consideration of implementability. Is the data available to support the framework? And robustness. Is that data robust? And as you can imagine, there's quite a trade-off between some of those criteria. So drawing on the literature research and our consultations with stakeholders, we developed a strategic framework which had 3 key elements. The first was the choices that are available to households to manage their energy bills. The second was the different types of households. And the third was the tools and services to support households. And we'll now discuss each of those elements in turn. The first element in the strategic framework is the choices that households have to manage their energy bills. We identified 6 choices that households may make. The first was choosing a better energy deal. So in most Australian jurisdictions, the retail energy market is now competitive. And in those jurisdictions, there are a range of energy deals on offer by retailers. Households may be able to better manage their energy bill by choosing a better energy deal. The energy deal may have lower rates, a different structure, or different payment arrangements. The second choice was around alternative energy sources. Households are increasingly moving away from buying all their energy through their retailer to generating their own energy through, for example, solar panels on their rooftop and storing that energy for later use using batteries. While the upfront costs of these systems are relatively significant, the ongoing costs for running those systems are relatively low, and the household is able to lower their energy bill from the retailer. The next choice is around improving the building fabric and fixed appliances. So households can reduce the amount of energy that is needed to heat their home in winter and cool their home in summer by improving the building fabric. They can also reduce the amount of energy that is needed with more efficient fixed appliances. So they can either choose to reduce their energy bill by reducing the amount of energy used, or they can improve their level of comfort and their health and well-being by doing those things and using the same amount of energy. The next choice is around more efficient equipment and non-fixed appliances. And it's similar to the one above, that they can replace their energy equipment and plug-in appliances with more energy efficient models and reduce the amount of energy that is needed and thereby reduce their energy bills, or can use the same amount of energy and improve their level of comfort. The next decision is around choosing to change the way that energy is used. Households can manage their energy bills by changing the way they use energy. For example, they may choose to hang up wet clothes to dry rather than use a clothes dryer. They can choose to put on warmer clothes and turn down space heating, or use window coverings to keep the home cooler rather than turn on an air conditioner. And the final choice is around using less energy at peak times. So if the household is on a retail energy bill where the cost of electricity is higher at certain times a day, or has a separate component for the maximum amount of energy used during peak times, the household can manage their energy bills by using less energy at certain times a day. The household could, for example, run the dishwasher or washing machine overnight, or run only one of the dishwasher, washing machine and air conditioner at the same time in the middle of the day. In a practical sense, this choice is only available to those households with a smart meter installed. So this slide shows the second element in the strategic framework, which is the type of household. So our literature review identified a wide range of segmentation models. These differed with respect to the approach to segmenting customers. We noted 3 broad approaches: a statistical analysis of survey data, sectoral segmentation, and conceptual models. They also differed with respect to the types of attributes used to segment consumers, and these can be broadly categorised as demographic, so for example, age, gender or income; geographic, for example, city, state or urban/rural; psychographic, such as attitudes, values and opinions; and behavioural, brand loyalty, usage level, benefit sought, etc. The number of dimensions in the segmentation model also varied. Models generally had 1, 2 or 3 dimensions. We didn't identify any segmentation model that met our design criteria, but we identified elements from those segmentation models that we have incorporated in the segmentation framework. We concluded that the most appropriate segmentation framework was a conceptual model. This was the only approach to segmenting customers that ensured the framework was consumer-oriented and covered all residential customers. that it was three-dimensional. There were many segmentation models that segmented based on one or more of motivation, opportunity, and ability. There were a couple of trade-offs that we needed to consider in developing the segmentation framework. One of these was around the manageability of the framework. The greater the number of segments, the more similar the consumers within each segment, but the less manageable the framework. On balance, we settled on 9 segments. So we've got 8 segments using the 2x2 matrix based on the 3 dimensions of motivation, opportunity, and ability, with a 9th segment in the middle. The other trade-off was around the implementability of the framework. A model based on demographic and/or geographic data rates more highly than one based on motivation, opportunity, and ability on the implementability scale, but it rates poorly on other criteria, particularly effectiveness. On balance, we settled on using variables for which data are not readily available, but which provides a better strategic fit. So the segmentation framework we settled on has the 9 segments. So there's the high, low on the motivation dimension, and you'll see that running along the bottom of that diagram. There's a high, low on the opportunity dimension, which is on the y-axis, and high, low on the ability dimension, which is the z-axis. And one that is in the middle on all 3 dimensions, which we refer to as Middle Australia. Now, there's a range of factors that influence a household's motivation, opportunity, and ability. The factors that influence a household's motivation to take action to manage their energy bill include their attitude towards the behaviour, the alignment with choices made within the household's circle of influence, the likelihood of success, and the extent to which they are willing or unwilling to create disharmony or conflict. The factors that influence a household's opportunity to take action to manage their energy bill include the type of housing, home ownership status, their scope to manage the energy bill. For example, are they currently on the best energy bill? In which case they don't have much opportunity. And do they already have energy efficient appliances installed? And their access to liquid funds. We considered liquid funds was more important than income, which income can be a less reliable indicator of opportunity. There are people on high incomes with no liquid funds, and conversely, people on low incomes with high liquid funds. The factors that influence a household's ability to manage their energy bill include their literacy, numeracy, problem solving and research skills, any language barriers, their ability to self-advocate or negotiate, their belief in their ability to succeed, their ability to trust in others, their ability to influence behaviour of all household members, their general interest in and capability using technology. The factors that are relevant to segmenting households vary based on the choice. For example, home ownership is relevant to choosing alternative energy sources and choosing to improve the building fabric, but is not relevant to choosing a better energy deal or choosing more energy efficient appliances. And it's for that reason that the fixed and non-fixed energy efficient appliances have been separated in this model. Another example is that the ability to influence the behaviour of all household members is most relevant for choosing to change the way energy is used. The factors that influence a household's motivation and opportunity will vary for each of the 6 choices. For example, a household may rate high on motivation to choose a better energy deal because they are not currently on the best energy deal. But they may rate low on motivation to choose to improve the building fabric of their home because of the perceived cost. A household may rate high on opportunity to choose more energy efficient equipment because they have an old fridge, but rate low on opportunity to choose an alternative energy source because they rent their home. The factors that influence a household's motivation and opportunity will also vary over time. For example, a household may rate high on opportunity to choose a better energy deal, but once they've chosen the best energy deal, they will rate low on opportunity, at least in the short term. A household may rate low on motivation to turn off the air conditioner to manage their energy bill while teenage children are living at home so as to maintain family harmony, but they may rate high on motivation as soon as the children leave home. Conversely, the factors that influence a household's ability to manage their energy bills are less likely to vary over time. So the segmentation framework, as I said, comprises 9 segments or types of households. So we've named these enthusiasts. So these households are highly motivated, have high levels of ability, and are always seeking out new opportunities to manage their energy bills. Completers. These households are highly motivated, have high levels of ability, but already effectively manage their energy bills, so there are no additional opportunities remaining. Dependents. These households have the motivation and opportunity to manage their energy bills, but do not have the ability. Stuck households have the motivation to manage their energy bills, but do not have the motivation or the ability. Middle Australia. These households have average levels of motivation and ability and some opportunity to manage their energy bills. Complacent households have the ability and opportunity to manage their energy bills, but do not have the motivation. Competent households have the ability to manage their energy bills, but there are no opportunities remaining to manage their energy bills, and they have no motivation to seek out new opportunities. Cautious households have the opportunity to manage their energy bills, but do not have the ability or motivation. And hard to help households do not have the motivation, ability, or opportunity to manage their energy bills. So I'll now hand over to Mayella, and she will talk about the third element of the strategic framework, the tools and services to support households to manage their energy bills.
Thanks, Marianne. So as part of this project and the framework, we identified the most appropriate initiatives by each consumer segment for households to manage their bills. Now, while we acknowledge that there is a wide range of tools and services that can help households to do so, to ensure that the framework met the design criteria of being enduring, that is, that we could accommodate current and future requirements, the initiatives that we identified were generic in nature. So broadly, the type of initiatives, we categorize them under 5 categories. The first one is information, advice, and non-financial support. The initiatives under this category include, for instance, awareness campaigns and general information provided through a variety of media, communication of information through word-of-mouth communications or role models, the use of exemplars, for instance, open houses and demonstration projects, providing tailored or simple personalized information to specific households, for instance, annual bills or different tariffs, energy efficiency advice that is specific to a household or in-home audits, and market-based tools and services that could assist households to take action, for instance, investment or comparator tools, websites, and apps. The second category of tools and services that we included in the framework are under incentives. These type of initiatives include, for instance, providing feedback on outcomes that is either general, for instance, energy use and cost, or specific to household, for instance, data provided by a smart meter. The control of devices by a third party, for instance, direct load control, and initiatives to incentivize the desired outcome or penalize undesired choices. The third category was financial support. Examples of initiatives that provide direct financial support include things like loans, energy performance contracts, which is when an energy service company is engaged to improve the energy efficiency of a facility with the savings guaranteed to pay for the capital investment required to implement that improvement. grants and subsidies that provide financial direct benefits to households, direct government investment in public housing upgrades, and funding to community organizations to provide services. The fourth category was regulation. On regulation, initiatives include, for instance, minimum performance standards for appliances and building fabric and labeling, regulation of information provision and of schemes and technologies that incentivize and enable households to manage their energy bills, regulation of energy deals and payment support, for instance, bill smoothing, having a shorter billing period or payment plans, and the removal of market policy and regulatory barriers for new products and services that could enable households to manage their energy bills better. The final category was about support services, with these interventions referring to providing households with access to community services that can support and assist them in taking action to manage their bills. After defining and categorizing the different tools and services that could help households manage their energy bills, we identify which of those are the most appropriate to support each different type of household. Fourth, the appropriateness of initiatives was assessed through the consideration of two things: their efficiency in terms of value for money, and their effectiveness in terms of supporting households to manage their bills. We imagine that some tools and services are suitable or effective for some households, but they might be ineffective for others. For instance, awareness campaigns are a low-cost intervention, broadly, that would be effective for households with high levels of ability and motivation. However, they will be ineffective for those households with low levels of ability and motivation. In contrast, providing personalized information to households might be highly effective for all households, but would not be an effective, efficient approach because not all households will meet this level of support, and it will also be very expensive. So, the tools and services that could help households manage their bills would also vary depending on the type of choice that they're making. For instance, while government investment in public housing upgrades is a relevant support for improving the building fabric of a household, it is not relevant for choosing the best energy deal. So you can see the number of variations that the different tools and services and households will have. So broadly, the tools and services are appropriate for each household, for each type of choice that can be made to manage energy bills were identified, and the details of all those presentations can be found in the report in chapter 7. However, as an overview, I'll go through what is considered the most appropriate intervention for different household segments. In terms of information, advice, and non-financial support initiatives, our key findings are that, as mentioned before, awareness campaigns and general information can be used to increase the level of motivation to make a choice to households that are already highly motivated, that is, the enthusiasts and considers, and also might assist those with a medium level of motivation in Middle Australia. All other types of households will require more specific information. Households with a low ability level and a low level of motivation, for instance, cautious and hard to help households, require the provision of simple, personalized information to a trusted source, as they have a low level of trust in skills and low literacy and numeracy levels. Unless the information is provided proactively in this way, these households will not seek the information and increase their level of motivation to make a choice. Tailored information is required by those households that have a high ability but a low level of motivation, that is, the pleasant and competent households, and a high level of motivation but a low level of ability, that is, the dependent and stuck households, as well as Middle Australia. An example of tailored information is a pilot project that was done by ACIL called Energy Insights, in which a number of households were provided with digital electricity meters that provided greater insights into how the energy was being used by different appliances and provide them with personalized estimates about how the energy was costing them and contributing to the overall bill. In terms of market-based tools and services, these are only likely to work with households that have high ability levels and high motivation, that is, for enthusiasts and complete. Finally, information and support from trusted sources is required by those households with a low ability level and a low level of motivation. That is support from households, the cautious and hard to help, as they might not have the trust and the literacy, numeracy, problem solving, and research skills to access market-based tools that could provide them with this information. If we turn now to the group of initiatives under incentives, our key findings are that households with with a high ability level and a high level of motivation would respond well to the provision of general feedback, for instance, through a periodic bill. However, for all other households, more specific and timely feedback is required. This could be as simple as providing more frequent energy bills than quarterly, or using more innovative approaches such as in-home displays, apps, and prompts. Third-party control devices, for instance, controlling larger appliances such as pool pumps or water heaters and air conditioners, could assist most households to manage their energy bills, except those with high ability and high motivation. Initiatives to incentivize desired outcomes, for instance, to incentivize the use of solar power through the provision of competitive feed-in tariffs, might not motivate those households with high ability level, as they would have the trust and skills to respond to incentives. Initiatives to penalize undesirable outcomes, for instance, setting higher council rates for low energy efficiency properties, might more effectively increase the motivation of those with high ability level, high opportunity, but a low level of motivation. They might be also appropriate for households that are renting, so that the issue of split incentives could be addressed. However, in terms of penalizing undesired outcomes, care must be taken to not willingly damage other people who don't have the opportunity or ability. In terms of financial support initiatives are suitable for households that have low opportunity in terms of access to liquid funds to invest in actions that could help them manage their bills. The type of funding or the way the funding is provided is also different for each type of household. For instance, funding to households with high ability level, that is completers and competent, could be provided through loans or energy performance contracts. However, for households with a low ability level, that is stuck and hard to help, a most appropriate funding approach would be through direct subsidies and grants. Financial support can also be provided to people living in public housing through government investment directly in housing upgrades, and also through funds to community organizations who can then support households to manage their bills. With regards to regulation, initiatives that regulate minimum performance standards and technologies are most appropriate to households that have low ability, that is dependent, stuck, cautious, and hard to help. And they're also appropriate initiatives for Middle Australia and for households with a high ability level but a low level of motivation, and or in the case of regulation of the building fabric and appliances for those that are renting. Initiatives that regulate the information provided to households could benefit households that have a low ability or low motivation. They are also appropriate for initiatives for Middle Australia. Households that have a high to medium level of ability, that is, our enthusiast completers, complacent, and competent, can benefit from schemes that incentivize them to manage their bills. For instance, white scheme certificates. The removal of market and regulatory barriers will benefit households with high opportunity as well as middle value. Finally, the initiatives in the support services category relate to services provided by community organizations that can support and assist households taking action. So these services would most benefit those households that have a low level of ability, which are our cautious, hard to help, dependent, and stuck. Now we know it's a lot of information, so we thought we'll put it into an example of how the framework would apply to an example household. So, as noted in previous slides, our framework comprises 3 elements. That's 6 choices that households can make, 9 different types of households, and a range of tools that are appropriate to these households. And as mentioned before, the motivations, abilities, and opportunities of a household will vary by choice, type, and over time. So this next slide is an example of a household that we call Button for, who is a single person on a pension living in public housing. Bo has struggled his whole life to hold on to any jobs and to secure accommodation. So the next couple of slides identify, number 1, the segment in which Bob falls with respect to each of the choices he has to manage the energy bill. And second, the types of tools and services that are appropriate to support him in making each type of choice at this point in time. There's additional examples in the report of different types of households that we can go through. So to start with, we established that Bob's literacy, numeracy, and research skills are low, that he has low trust in others, and he has low interest in and capability of using technology. Hence, his ability is overall low. So if we first look at when he's choosing a better energy bill. To identify him, we established that for him, energy bills are too complex. Bob has accepted the offer provided to him by the only retailer that he trusted. He might be paying too much, but he does not have any interest in trying to get another energy bill, which he considers might not be better in any case. So in this case, for this choice, this household has a low motivation but high opportunity. So his segment with respect to that choice is cautious. To address or to help Bob manage better his energy bills, the initiatives that could help him are information on how to shop around for a better deal provided to a traditional based media, so not apps, maybe not internet, and provide him with access to community organization or a trusted source that would support him in getting a better deal. Now, in terms of if he were looking at choosing alternative energy sources, we have just established that Bob lives in public housing, and hence he is not able to install an alternative energy source to help him manage his bills. Even if he could, he does not have the interest or technical know-how to consider installing an alternative energy source. So in this case, for this choice, his motivation is low, but also his opportunity is low. So he falls into the hard to help segment. Really, the only initiative that could help him to have an alternative energy source is government investment in public housing offerings. In terms of choosing, the third choice, choosing to improve the building fabric and fix appliances. Again, Bob is in public housing, so he has full opportunity to change building fabric. He's just pleased to have a roof over his shoulders, so he doesn't have a lot of opportunity to do much about it. Again, he's under hard to help segment for this choice. Again, an initiative to help him on that regard would be covering investment in public housing upgrades and minimum standards on fixed appliances and on public housing itself. With regards to choosing more energy efficiency equipment, we established he has very few appliances, but the ones he has do the job, so he's not thinking about replacing them until they fail. In this case, his motivation is low, and his opportunity is low in terms of the funds he has to access better appliances. Again, he falls under the hard to help segment. What would help him to manage his energy better in terms of appliances is to provide him with subsidies for efficient equipment, the general minimum performance standards for appliances and labeling, and to give him simple personalized information about the options he might have to upgrade more efficient equipment. The next choice is to change the way energy is used. In this regard, Bob doesn't really understand his energy bill and how the energy bill might change with the use of these appliances and from one month to the other. He uses very little energy in this case, so he has no opportunity to change much the way he uses energy. So again, he falls under the hard to help segment. What could help him in this regard is providing him with timely feedback about the benefits of changing the way energy is used around the house, to provide him with access to community organizations to support him on changing the way that he uses the energy in his home, and to provide itself the community organizations with information on funds to support him. Finally, with regards to choosing to use less energy at peak times, again, he uses very little energy, his flow is very flat, and he's at home most of the time. He does not have any concept of demand or how it can be reduced. So he's again into the hard to help segment. And the initiatives that could help him would be providing him with information on the benefits of installing a smart meter and moving to the demand-based tariffs provided through different channels. And again, the access to community organizations to help him understand his demand and how that translates into cost. So I'll pass it now to Leah.
Thanks, Mayella. And as Mayella said, we do have further examples in the report. Just through our discussions with various people, everyone seemed to identify with Battler Bob the easiest, and that's why we've used that example today. So I'll now talk about using the strategic framework. So we envisaged that it could be used by policymakers in 3 ways, and they're quite similar, but with just some slight differences. So to identify the tools and services that could support a particular type of choice that could be made by households to manage their energy bills, to identify a particular type of tool or service that could be considered to support households to choose to manage their energy bills, and to identify the tools and services that could support a particular group of households to manage their energy bills. So we'll go through each of those approaches in turn. So the first one is around using the framework to identify the tools and services that could support a particular type of choice that could be made by households to manage their energy bills. For example, there may be an objective to provide support to households to improve their building fabric. So the first step is to identify the choice that is of interest to the policymaker, and in this case, the choice is to improve the building fabric. The next step is to identify the tools and services that are appropriate to support that choice for each type of household. Now, there's a lot of information in the report, and it's very difficult to provide all of that information verbally or on a slide. So what I'm going to do through this section is to refer to various parts of the report where the information is laid out. And in this case, table 7.3 in the report identifies the tools and services that are appropriate for each type of household to choose to improve the building fabric. The next steps are to identify the tools and services that are and are not available. So using our example, table 9.4 in the report provides a heat map of the availability of the tools and services to improve the building fabric as at May 2018. It indicates, for example, that general information is provided to all types of households, but is considered to be appropriate only for enthusiasts and completers. Providing some form of comparator or investment tool is considered to be appropriate for improving the building fabric for Middle Australia enthusiasts, completers, complacent and competent households, but currently is not available, or as at May 2018 it was not available. The only form of assistance that is considered to be appropriate for stuck households and is widely available is the regulation of minimum performance standards for building fabric. So then if we look at the second way is to identify a particular type of tool or service that could be considered to support households to choose to manage their energy bills. For example, there may be an interest in providing loans to facilitate households to improve their building fabric. As before, the first step is to identify the tool or service that is of interest to the policymaker. And in this case, the tool or service is EPCs, loans, etc. The second step is to identify the types of households for which that tool or service is considered to be appropriate. So table 7.3 in the report indicates that EPCs, loans, etc. are considered to be appropriate for completers and competence households. That is, households with high ability to manage their energy bills, but low opportunity, which may be due to insufficient liquid funds. The next step is to identify the other tools and services that are already available to those types of households. Table 9.4 in the report indicates that as at May 2018, the appropriate tools and services available to completers were the Smarter Choice program in New South Wales and Victoria, general information, feedback on outcomes, which is just the general information on retail bills, state-based energy efficiency schemes, and Tasmania's energy efficiency loan scheme. The appropriate tools and services available to competent households were open houses in New South Wales and Victoria, tailored information in South Australia, ACT, Victoria and Tasmania, state-based energy efficiency schemes, Tasmania's energy efficiency loan scheme, and the regulation of minimum performance standards. So based on that information, a decision can then be made as to whether the additional support, in this case the EPC's loans, is required for these households on top of the tools and services they already have. And the third way that the framework could be used by policymakers is to identify the tools and services that can support a particular group of households to manage their energy bills. For example, there may be an interest in supporting stuck households to manage their energy bills. The first step is to identify the type of household that is of interest to the policymaker. In this case, the type of household is a stuck household. That is, households that are highly motivated to manage their energy bills but have low ability and low opportunity. The second step is to identify the types of tools and services that are appropriate for that type of household. Tables 7.1 to 7.6 in the report indicate the types of tools and services that are appropriate for stuck households for each of the types of choices. These include word-of-mouth communication or role models through traditional media, proactively providing tailored information to the specific household, providing easy access to information, support and education for trusted sources and organisations that provide support to households, feedback on outcomes that is specific and timely, grants, subsidies, etc., regulating information provided to households, providing access to community organisations that can be engaged by trusted sources to assist and support households to take action. The next step is to identify the tools and services that are already available to that household. And the tools and services that are available as at May 2018 for each of the types of choices for stuck households are set out in tables 9.2 to 9.7 of the report. And from this information, the policymaker can then assess whether additional tools or services are required for that type of household. So, this slide provides an overview of the strategic framework. In the top right-hand corner, you'll see that it highlights the 3 different elements that we've discussed today. To the left are the 6 types of choices that households have to manage their energy bills. The bottom left are the 9 types of households. Bottom right are the types of tools and services that can support the 9 different types of households to manage their energy bills through the 6 different types of choices. So, suggested areas for further research. So, as I said before, this is a conceptual model. It is based on the literature search. So, areas where further research could be done is to validate the types of households that we have proposed, to validate the appropriateness of the proposed tools and services by type of household. So, basically, our assessment has drawn on the literature review and our experience, but there's no validation to date as such, and assess the number of households by type and by choice. This information would enable policymakers to estimate costs associated with implementing various tools and services, but we note that any assessment of that type could only be done by survey, and the biggest issue with segmentations that are based on statistical methods is that the hard to help and cautious households in particular generally don't respond terribly well to surveys, so maybe underrepresented. So we thank you for your time today, and now open the webinar to questions.
Hello, I'm actually asking a question on behalf of Chris, who wasn't able to ask through the Q&A, so I'm going to relay the question and hope that it makes sense. So my question, or Chris's question, is about, it was from earlier on in the presentation pack. Why is alternative energy choice listed as the number 2 choice? Could it be changed to number 6?
That's a good question. We changed the order several different times based on discussions with the stakeholders. So it's trying to get through the most logical sequence, and I think it's fair to say that everyone's personal view on what is the most logical sequence varies. So I think it sounds like a naff answer, but it was on balance. That was the sequence that was determined. It's not, there's no higher emphasis on it being placed at number 2 or number 6. It's just a sequence in which we've then sorted the report. But it really doesn't make any other difference in terms of importance or anything else of that decision.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying they're not in a hierarchy, so to speak,
no.
they're kind of just,
No,
cool.
No.
And I've got one more question, if I can, given I've got the mic, if I can jump in as well. Is it okay to go through each of the 3 entry points?
Which entry points are you talking about with the policymakers?
Yes, I think so. I'm just on text with Chris and she's going to confirm that. But yeah, I think that makes sense, yes.
Yeah, it's
you further explain those.
Yeah, I suppose when we were looking at those approaches, we were trying to put ourselves in the shoes of policymakers.
Yep.
And so when you're sitting there in the shoes of a policymaker, and you might have a minister or someone more senior in the department come and ask you a particular question. And so it's really, however that question is framed, in essence, it comes down to those 3 different approaches. And so it's really just changing the sequence in the way you're approaching the question rather than anything else.
We got 2 questions about sharing the slides of the webinar. We will be doing that. We're going to post a recording of the webinar online, so you should be able to link people to the webinar itself, and the slide back will be part of that recording. We'll have a talk internally about whether we do that online separately as well. Anne Armandson has posted a question about time of use tariffs. Okay, well, maybe if I ask the question on behalf of Anne, have we undertaken any modelling relating to appliance use and savings?
That type of modelling wasn't a part of this particular project. I suppose we have ACIL Allen separately has done quite a lot of work in relation to time of use tariffs and looking at the impacts that those would have on consumers, but it wasn't an integral part of this particular piece of work. I'm not sure whether Kerry wants to add to that.
There are a few pieces of research that would touch on that. Nothing that I can sort of pull out as a definitive answer to that straight away, but I'm very happy to see whether I can find some more information and send that out. Jenny Gregory had a question too, which about noting that one of the main barriers for renters is their landlord, and asking how to incentivise the landlord to upgrade the property but not hike rents. So I'm just going to hand that over to Mayella.
Hi. Yes, the split incentive is one of the biggest problems we face as, I guess, policymakers. In terms of the initiatives that we think would be helpful in that regard, it's really to have, for instance, initiatives that incentivize, or actually the opposite, that penalize undesirable outcomes for the owners of the property. However, it is hard to then limit the pass on to rent. That's not something that can easily be ensured, I guess. The other type of initiative that could be used for that is minimum standards in terms of for renters. This has been trialed, for instance, in New Zealand in terms of mandating minimum standards in terms of insulation for all rental properties. There's also nowadays minimal standards in terms of, say, water saving showers, etc. Now, the passing on to rent, that's sort of a difficult question, and one that is dependent on market and, I guess, the balance of supply demand of rental properties. So, but yeah, those are the two probably most relevant initiatives that we found to manage energy bill. Is there anything you want to say, Marianne?
So it's Kerry back again. One of the this sits outside, separate to the work we're talking about at the moment, but just to alert people to the fact that there has been that Energy Consumers Australia through PowerShift convened a housing summit last September. There's work carrying on with the consumer groups in that space, and certainly that split incentive is a critical question that we're interested in seeing whether we can generate a little bit of action on. There's a bit of a watch this space. There's a COAG Energy Council process that looks as though it will touch on some of those issues in a fairly coordinated way. So we're hoping to get a bit more action on that. I'm going to take the prerogative of the chair and ask my own question now. Which is, I think just to ask Mayella and Marianne about that segment of Middle Australia. So, and just to ask them to unpackage a bit more the rationale for defining a group that has medium opportunity and medium ability and medium motivation.
Okay, probably a lot of the discussion through the development of the strategic framework was in fact around this particular segment. So one of the questions was, why didn't we have like a 3 by 3 by 3 or just stick with the 2 by 2 by 2? So one option was because there are a range, across each dimension there's a range of households, the low, the medium and the high. So if we had that low, medium, high against each dimension, we would have ended up with a 3 by 3 by 3, which would have had 27 segments, which when you look at the manageability would rate poorly because you've now got 27 segments. The fallback from that was to then go to a 2 by 2 by 2, but we felt that that masked, in essence, this group of households that are in effect in the middle. So if you're looking at the extremities of the model, they're people where if they're, for example, low on motivation or low on opportunity, there is some effort required to move them along that dimension so that action is actually taken. If with the households in the middle, there's actually less that needs to be done to try and shift them in terms of their motivation or opportunity. Or the literature research had identified sort of this group of households in the middle, and consumer research that we've done in the past has also identified this group in the middle. So we felt that it better reflected the households to actually then account for that group separately in the middle rather than force them into one of those 8 segments.
Thanks, Marianne. I actually had one of my colleagues had a question, so I might just pass the mic over to him. This is Jim Wellsbot.
Yeah, hi, colleagues. So fantastic, enormous piece of work. I was just curious, I guess, to expand the information report related to the programs that are currently in place, and to ask the ACIL Allen team whether there's any obvious or immediate gaps that they might have identified along the way.
As Marianne mentioned before, there are some specific gaps for specific households, but I guess which are outlined in section 9.2 of the report. However, in terms of general gaps that were identified, I guess, across many different sectors or households in Australia as of what was available at May last year, there are a few of those. One is, for instance, exemplars which were recommended for a different number of households across all type of choices, except for those relating to an energy deal. We found that these exemplars or projects, display projects if you want, were only available in certain states. Then the other gap we found was that tailored, simple, personalized information that is household specific is either lacking, is inappropriate, insufficient, or confined to some Australian states. One thing that we found was widely available was several tools and calculators to help households to change the way they use energy, or to install more energy efficient equipment and appliances, and also for solar power and the like. However, there was a clear gap in terms of a calculator or a tool that could help a household make a decision about improving their building fabric, how much would it cost, what it will look like in terms of savings, etc. Feedback on outcomes is clearly missing across all households and all types of choices. The only feedback that is generally available is what you get in your energy bill, which is infrequent and high level. For some households that might be enough, but for others, as we said before, they might require more specific and more timely feedback. It could be just more frequent bills, or alternatively access to more detailed information through smart meters. There are also general gaps in terms of penalizing undesirable outcomes, in particular, and this has been asked before, with respect to initiatives to address that split incentive barrier for tenanted properties. In terms of financial assistance, there seems to be a lot of grants and subsidies available to relevant consumer segments. However, there was general gaps in terms of investing in public housing upgrades and funding of community organizations to provide services to the most vulnerable households. Now, this might be, I'll make a note here, that investment in public housing might not be evident from the outside, so it might be happening, but it wasn't publicly available information. There's also a partial gap in terms of the provision of loans to relevant segments and of initiatives to incentivize desired outcomes across different types of choices. In terms of regulation, the gaps that we identify were regulation to provide information to households, of technologies to better manage bills, and a little bit of removal of market barriers and regulatory barriers to enable households to make better choices. And finally, there seems to be a gap in terms of assisting organizations that support households. Some jurisdictions do have some of that, but it's insufficient and confined to, as I said, a few states.
Thanks, Mayela. We have two questions from a further question from Anne around the link to time of use tariffs and load shifting. So Anne's question said that she's undertaken modelling relating to time of use to look at, it was around the changing energy usage to shift load in reaction to a time of use tariff. And she's asking whether there's a daily kilowatt hour or megajoule unit measurement for these consumer groups.
Okay, unfortunately we haven't been able to get Anne online, but in terms of her question, first of all, in relation to the time of use tariff, that could be asked in relation to the choice of energy deal or in the choice in the way that energy is used or choice in the way that energy is used at peak times. So if I cover off each of those in turn, first of all, in terms of the choice of energy deal, we're not necessarily saying they've got to go to a time of use tariff. In many cases, the biggest savings for customers to help them manage their energy bills are in fact for those on a standing offer to move to a market offer. So there's many different types of choices that people can make in terms of their energy deal. In terms of changing the way energy is used, so that could be either shifting use or it could be reducing use. I know through much consumer research I've done in the past, one of the big consumers in a household is often teenage children, where households just choose to maintain a harmonious household rather than try to get them to manage their use. But there's many ways in which that energy use could be reduced or energy bill managed by changing the way energy is used. So we use the example of running appliances overnight. So many now have timers on them so you can do that. But then there's many households that choose not to do that because they don't want to. Obviously, the benefits of that are dependent on the ratio between your peak and off-peak tariff. And that does vary, obviously, on the energy deal that you're after. In terms of a daily kilowatt hour or megajoule unit measurement for the consumer groups, I'm presuming that's talking about relevant to each of the different types of households. And the answer is no. It is based on their opportunity, ability, and motivation, not on their use of energy. And there could be wide ranges of energy use for people within all of those segments. And obviously work that we've done before has shown that there's people in the hard to help households who in fact use a lot of energy. A lot of the work shows that vulnerable customers generally use multiples of that are higher than households in other groups. And also, the enthusiasts, often they're ones, they're completely in a different segment to the hard to help. And they often can fall into two categories. Either they love having every device you can practically imagine, and so their energy use is high, or that they actually are highly motivated, have a high level of ability to actually drive their energy consumption really low. And in terms of energy bills, that they have the alternative energy sources installed, so they're actually drawing very little from the grid, if not feeding back into the grid.
Thanks, Marianne. We have another question from Liesl.
So is this another thing that's been raised with us? We're just wondering what happens if the source information is not continuously updated? If that's the case, will the framework still be useful and relevant?
There are many elements of the strategic framework which are static. The static elements are the types of choices and the types of households, and the types of tools and services that we consider to be appropriate for each of those different types of households. The area that is dynamic is the specific tools and services that are available. So if a policymaker is in a particular jurisdiction and is only drawing on the information for their jurisdiction, you would imagine that they should have up-to-date information for that particular jurisdiction. But if you're talking about someone in industry, for example, who's wanting to draw on that information, it may be a bit more difficult. Ideally, yes, that part of the framework would continually be updated, but we're not aware of any process at this point in time to maintain that part of the framework over time.
Okay, thank you.
Now there's a question from Madeline Ellis, which is, why is the main focus on household consumers? My understanding is that the highest energy users are industry, business and agricultural users, and they get a lower kilowatt rate than households. I think that's probably for me to answer. So Marianne and Mila are nodding a lot. Power Shift is a project that was looking at ways to help vulnerable households manage their energy bills. So our remit and the grant we've received was very much to focus on vulnerable consumers. And so our beginning point has always been households. Take on, I agree entirely that industry, business and agricultural users will be higher energy users, but energy prices for households have effectively doubled over the last 10 years. People are doing it tough. And so our aim in this was to try and find ways to help them manage their bills, reduce their affordability, and realise the many benefits that arise from more effective energy management use. But you do raise a point which I might throw back to Marianne and Mayella, which is actually around how relevant the segmentation framework. It was aimed at residential energy consumers, but whether it's relevant to other types of consumers.
It absolutely is, because if you look, first of all, at the types of choices, they're similar types of choices, but for example, when you look at energy efficient equipment, the types of equipment that's used by an industry, business or agricultural user might be quite different, but it still falls within that generic title. In terms of the framework, in terms of looking at 3 dimensions, the motivation, ability and opportunity, that's equally applicable. All of our descriptions and our labels are around households, but you could easily change those to other types of users. And then in terms of the tools and services, again, the generic types of tools and services are applicable. And it's really then just looking at we've done the stock take for households, but there's also, you would need to do a stock take for those other types of users.
Marianne, Mayella here. I just tried to say that in the range of reports that have been done on the program, the multiple benefit it's something you can readily apply to any type of energy efficiency intervention, either consumer or business focused. So that's definitely one that could be used too.
Thank you very much. I've got Anthony in Tasmania. Anthony, are you able to ask your question?
Great. I just wanted to know if there were any benefits for landlords to install distributed energy resources or improving household energy efficiency in terms of beyond just mandating that all houses have to have a minimum standard for insulation or whatnot. Is there any sort of regulatory framework or anything that would allow for landlords to benefit from that? Will be incentivized to install solar or batteries or anything like that for their renters, for the tenants?
So in terms of helping households manage their bills, there's obviously benefits for tenants if the landlords did install DERs or improve energy efficiency. Obviously, the landlords would only be looking at fixed appliances, not the plug-in appliances. And in effect, you've got here the big issue, the split incentive. What incentive or benefits are there for landlords to do those things? And that is the challenge. Without regulation requiring them to do it as some form of other incentive where they get a greater benefit, then it's hard. There was the question earlier from Jenny Gregory in terms of the price hikes, or the rent hikes. So if doing those things led to a higher rental or led to a higher quality tenant, then in those cases there would be a benefit for the landlord. But it is an area that is, I suppose, very difficult.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's anything that you knew that was potentially on the horizon for, I guess, that the landlord to be able to sell electricity at a cheaper rate to the tenant, if they could.
Sorry, it's Kerry again. I'm not aware of any kind of initiatives in train, Anthony, but there is a process that COAG Energy Council has just agreed to begin, which is talking about improving the energy performance standards of existing housing.
Yeah, great.
That split incentive and the incentives we give to landlords and the protections we need to give to tenants to maintain housing affordability, I'd be expecting would be part of that process. We're not quite sure yet. It's just only been announced last week. So it's still there's still a bit of things to be uncovered, but absolutely it's something that's a priority and it's certainly a big priority for the consumer advocacy groups who are working in this space.
Do you think they'll be releasing drafts for comments?
I would hope so, yes. Actually, anybody who's interested in that, I don't think we've got anybody from Renew or on the line, but we are, in fact, we're coming out of the housing summit we did last year. We've been supporting a coalition of advocacy groups to keep working on housing issues. There's a couple of processes that offer some opportunities for change, and we've been working with ASBEC and some of the and through them the Property Council of Australia and Climate Works to bring together quite a big and a good coalition of organisations to promote change. Anybody's interested in that, very happy if you shoot me an email and we'll pass it on to Renew and get you in touch with them. I think we're about to run out of time and I suspect we kicked off Zoom. So I might wrap up if that's all. And thanks Marianne and Mayella very much for their time and for taking us through what's a really substantive report and one that we think is going to be useful, for a very long time to come. And on that, I'd actually just to put in a bit of a plug. It is a substantive report, but the appendix is also really worth a proper look because it has a good range of recent behavioural research and captures a whole range of reports that are also pretty useful. The only thing I'd like to just also note is that we're going to be using this framework to help us develop through PowerShift some consumer information products over the next couple of months. We've commissioned 89 Degrees East to help us with that, and we'll be holding some targeted stakeholder workshops and some online webinars to help develop those products and to build the research findings into that work. If anybody's interested in getting involved in that work, again, please send me an email. You should all have my email. If you don't, kerry.connors@energyconsumersaustralia.com.au. Thank you again. Thanks to everybody for participating, and have a good rest of your Monday. Thanks a lot. Bye.